Hey everyone, Nathan P. LaCroix here from Under the Rock. This is another installment of the Iron Man vlog. This is the finished piece. It is very stiff because, of course, it's coated in epoxy resin. So I wanted to make it much like the movie, and also I just wanted to make sure it looked all connected like it does in the movie too. So one thing about the epoxy coating, it makes the overall suit nearly impossible to sit down. You cannot bend at the waist or the hips. You can't bend over to pick anything up. So if you are going to do this method, it looks fantastic, with professional cameras and out in the sun, because it's very glossy, very shiny, like those tabletop epoxy coated tables you'd see at some restaurants out there. So it's a thick layer of clear, so it just looks like this organic, shiny, not really metal, but not really plastic. Like, what kind of material is it? Again, much like the movie. If I had it my way, again, I would totally do like a latex suit. I think that would have been the best option. Of course, it's way too expensive. I was thinking about, like the old school Batman, like Batman 1, the movie, but that Tim Burton did. If I were to redo Iron Man from Infinity War, that would be the way I would do it. I would just have to accumulate some additional funds to do that. But when I do accumulate those funds, I will redo Iron Man completely and try that option and see how it looks. So this is the finished piece. It's hanging from the rack here. Let's see, what else do we got? Alright, so here's the back piece. Oh, I wanted to show you this too. The back piece here of the calf, it's left open so I can actually get my foot down in it. The biggest issue I have with this whole thing is getting into it. I can certainly slide into the torso piece. That's not a problem with getting into it if I were thin enough, but I'm working on that. All I did was I scaled for height. I did not scale for width. This thing, I need to be extremely fit in order to get into this. So if you are going to create an Iron Man like this, my recommendation, at least with the waist part, if you're a little bit rotund like myself, I would say scale up. I also have another video that talks about how to scale for width using some makeshift calipers. So you can always check that out too. Okay, front piece again. Oh, and these, I also made another video about how I made the indentations here. I forgot what they're called, but I made them really deep just for more dimension and more visual pop. Okay, so this is how the epoxy coating went. So this right here that you're looking at, this is untreated. This is the untreated EVA foam. This is a mix of just gold base, and I used the sea glass, or the stained glass from I believe it was Krylon that does the glass. So it looks like this iridescent red. Okay, so that you saw those were just spare lids, and I'm going to use that as kind of to hold up the torso. That way, when the epoxy drips, as you can see, look at that, I'm using a lot of garbage bags. What you don't see is on the ground as well. This is going to get messy. There's just no way around it. It runs. It's like a thick molasses, so it's going to drip. You just got to kind of deal with it. This is the Pro Marine Supplies Tabletop Epoxy A and B 1-to-1 ratio, either by weight or by volume, doesn't matter. And in fact, the measurements don't really have to be that exact. I've got my measuring cups here. Little measuring things. You don't really need specific measurements. If you have 2 cups of the same size, you can use that too. Alright, see, so pour A into the A cup, B into the B cup. You have your separate measuring cup as well to mix everything in. Don't forget your gloves, because again, it gets very sticky and very hard to get off once it dries. Okay. And with the epoxy, there's really no rhyme or reason on technique. You just gotta go for it, brush it on. Get a bunch of chip brushes, either from Amazon, eBay. The cheaper the better. In hindsight, I think a silicone brush would have been better, just because once the epoxy dries, you can give it a good whack and it would just break off, or you can break it off and reuse the brush. Going through chip brushes, although cheap, you can get them for 20 for $1 in some places. It's still the whole nickel and diming. I just didn't like the whole waste of all of those brushes. At the end of the day, I just saw this huge pile in the trash can. So there was another person on the Facebook replica prop forum who mentioned the silicone brushes. So if you're gonna do this, go with the silicone brush. Make the investment. It will save you money in the end. Oh, and with the epoxy resin, don't forget it's self-leveling. So although I'm brushing it on right now, it's not going to stay looking like it was just brushed on. Because it is so thin, it's going to kind of collapse on itself due to gravity and just create that glass look automatically. So you really don't have to worry about getting a smooth brushed finish on there. You just put it on, let it drip, it's going to form its own coat, and you just put on a second layer when you're ready, and just keep doing that until your desired thickness or desired strength. Oh, also on a side note, yeah, if you wanted to add additional strength without adding even more layers on the outside, you can always put the epoxy on the inside. That's only if you really have extra. I mean, it's not something I would personally recommend. I would say use other materials for added strength on the inside. Maybe the 2-part plastic resin that you can brush on. I don't know, just seems a little more expensive if you're using it just for strength rather than the visual effect that we're doing here. Also, the best way I found to coat the whole thing, just nice thin layers, take your time with it. Overall, this was 8 layers that I did. Very, very thin layers. Just wanted to make sure that there was no dripping or drip marks, because those are a little bit tricky to get out. Do one side at a time. Just do your 8 layers on the top side. Let it, let it dry, let it cure, and then turn it over and do the other side. And you can do this with all parts. There's me throwing stuff away. The heat gun. If you do have a heat gun, use it on the epoxy. One, it helps the epoxy level faster. Like I mentioned before, with the brush strokes, eventually, because of the viscosity of the epoxy, it'll eventually create its own nice smooth layer. But heating it will actually help it cure even faster. It's my beautiful wife, everyone. I'm also doing touch-ups as well. Any part that I saw that was like really thin, where it looks like it was sprinkled with water, I'll just add on just a little bit in those areas, give it a quick blast with the heat gun, and let it start curing. The thing about epoxy resin, it likes heat. It likes a nice dry heat. So if you are in an area right now where it's nice, hot, and dry, that's going to be perfect for the epoxy resin. If it's cold and humid, it's going to take a really long time to cure and harden. Whereas in a hot, dry environment, hitting it with the heat gun, it could take, a couple of hours for it to fully cure, for you to add on an additional layer if you'd like. In a cold environment, it could take quite a while. That's the end of the video. So that was just one piece. What we did here, I did at that same technique, I just applied it to all of the other parts of the armor, giving it that nice look. Some pros about this: again, it looks really nice out in the daylight. It has that nice sheen with the overall color as well. There's a lot of depth to it. Again, it looks like an iridescent red, where you can see the layers all the way down to the gold base, but you can tell there's some dimension there. The cons is you just can't move in this thing. You would basically be walking like a statue. I wouldn't recommend sitting down in this thing at all unless you added some extreme strength here, just so it doesn't completely break off. Because although I did 8 layers of the epoxy resin, it's still thin enough to where I can bend it and break it and break the whole thing. So that's kind of the trade-off. I would say if you're looking more for function, separate the upper chest and back piece with the waist piece, so it'll give you a little bit more movement. Maybe even the butt plate, having that completely separate too, so you actually do have some mobility. You can move it out of the way if you're going to sit down. So those are my comments. Again, this is my first try with Iron Man. I hope you'll like it. The electronic pieces, I'm going to look for alternatives. I can't do it. I suck at electronics. I suck at soldering, wiring. But honestly, I might just give this to somebody. I might sell it, just, kind of for anyone who wants to finish up on the armor or has expertise in electronics and really wants to be Iron Man. Yeah, just let me know if you're interested. So that's all I got. Thank you so much again for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos, and I will see you on the next one.